To create is likewise to give shape to one's faith. I read this sentence of Albert Camus when I was in high school, and it had a profound impact on me. Probably because it was the first time I realized the importance of creativity, and more specifically, the connection that existed between creativity and my future. This idea was quite relevant for me at the personal level because you might have not noticed, but I am a black man. And wait for it, I'm also Italian. My accent will inevitably come up at some point of this speech. I was born in the early 80s in a northern province of Italy, and even though I had a wonderful childhood, well, I have to say it because my mom is in the audience, I grew up with nobody that looked like me, as you can imagine. And this meant that everything that I wanted to do, that I desired to do, that I aspired to do, was directly dependent from my capacity to be creative. Unfortunately, when I was at school, creativity was not something that was encouraged. There was, in general society, I would say, it didn't place a lot of stock in it. Creativity was considered at best an indulgence. And in those moments and in that climate, it was quite easy to get through an experience where your creativity was squashed by some form of authority, either a parent, a teacher, a relative. And it was in those moments in which I started becoming doubtful about the value of my own creativity. What perhaps I didn't realize, though, at the time is that every time your creativity is suppressed, you get a little bit further away and disconnected from yourself. Now, this little story that I told you about my background has nothing to do with race. Race, in this case, is just a conduit to express what I believe is a human need, the need to live a creative life. Now, since my school days, thankfully, a lot has changed. In the past 10, 15 years, creativity passed from being one of the extras to now one of the main characters in our society. Just to give you a few examples, the World Economic Forum is consistently listing creativity among the top skills for the future of work. Or the United Nations, and specifically UNESCO, are placing creativity at the center not only of spiritual life, but also of socio-economical development of people and nations. Even here at TED, the most watched TED Talk of all time is the one of the late Sir Ken Robinson, who made an unforgettable speech about the value of creativity and education. So literally in less than 20 years, creativity passed from being hardly talked about to now be at the center of our discourse. Creativity is finally recognized as a fundamental human feature that needs to be nurtured and understood. Some people say that we live in the era of creativity, and I tend to agree. And yet, what does it even mean? What is creativity? I'm wondering, do we understand creativity beyond its superficial and trending term? Because I have this idea that creativity, despite the progress, remains a slippery concept. The only way to capture it without sounding too esoteric, it's still through some language of performativity. For example, an article titled, "How to be creative 15 minutes a day," or 5 hacks to live a creative life, or how to, and this is the worst of them all, think outside the box. Which box? Nobody knows. It is. When you think about it, it is almost if this language is pointing at creativity as something that exists outside of us. And our search is to find this tool that will magically endow us with creativity. it is almost if creativity is something that can be taught through a formula. But if there is one thing that I've learned after working more than 10 years in the space of creative education is that every time we talk about creativity, we actually talking to ourselves, directing our attention inwardly, and undergoing a search of our deep and authentic self. This search and this process is a process of self-discovery. When I think about self-discovery, I'm not thinking about anything particularly esoteric or philosophical or theoretical. I'm thinking about a concrete process of transformation. The word creativity, it is said that comes from the Sanskrit kar, that means to generate, to produce, to make. So the word itself hints at the practical dimension of life. So for me, creativity is about igniting an internal exploratory journey that results into a concrete process of transformation, and is both personal and collective. This means that creativity is a mindset, is a posture, it's an approach. It's not merely a performativity. And as such, we know that it is not something that can be accessed through linear thinking. So now, the question is, what is the path to creativity then? How can we best channel it? And especially, what type of creativity can we aspire to? I had the luck, the pleasure, and honor to work with some unique creative minds in my life and some great creativity pioneers, from philosophers to artists, to activists, to entrepreneurs, but also to students. And what I've noticed is that certain people are able to keep producing novel and useful ideas, not only for themselves, but also for their community. In other words, they are able to maintain a creative mindset throughout their life. By working with them, I realized and I observed that this capacity is underpinned by what I believe are 4 foundational values, ideas, that I would like to share with you today. These are self-awareness, Ubuntu, love, and courage. The first one is self-awareness. Our capacity to be self-aware starts by questioning what we know, or better, what we think we know. The philosopher Hegel put it in a very direct and blunt way by saying, we don't know what we know. The path to creativity, to self-awareness begins when the acceptance of what we don't know is transformed into a constant search for knowledge. This search is often an uncomfortable process. That's why we tend to avoid it so many times. But if taken, can provide us with profound knowledge that can inform our ethics and that can ground our ability to live an authentic and empathetic life. At the same time, creativity is ultimately an act of communication. It intrinsically connects us to others. That's why creativity cannot be a narcissist act. Well, in all fairness, it can be, and it often is, but I wouldn't suggest that this is the type of creativity that we should try for. There is a beautiful word that can help me express what I mean in this sense. And the word is Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a word that comes from the people of South Africa, of Southern Africa, and it became a guiding principle in the transition of South Africa from apartheid to democracy. Ubuntu is the fundamental belief that a person is a person only through others. I am because you are. This means that an individual whole existence is relative to the one of the collective. Ubuntu is the expression of the importance of our connection to an ecosystem in which all living things hold value and purpose. The third value that I would like to share with you today is love. Love may seem out of place in the realm of creativity, but it actually is the energy behind self-awareness in Ubuntu. One of my favorite authors, Bell Hooks, speaks about love as the practice of freedom. The best way to describe it is to say, without love, we cannot create and recreate a world that is more just, equal, and free. When I think about love in this term, I'm not thinking about love in its romantic, sentimental, or moralistic terms. I'm thinking about love as ethic, as a state of being, as this tough, universal quest of dare and growth that James Baldwin so intensely spoke of. Self-awareness is impelled by self-love. Love is what can help us to go through a process of self-actualization, and this means to be creative. At the same time, love can help us engaging in communion with the world, Ubuntu. So love becomes a foundational value to live a creative life. The last value that I would like to share with you today is courage. Courage is the preeminent of all values, because without courage, we cannot unlock all the other values. When I think about courage, I'm not thinking about the absence of fear. I'm not thinking about being fearless. Courage is what allows us to be active in our creative endeavor despite the fear. Courage is what allows us to dare, to make mistakes, and therefore to be creative. But let me give you a quick example where I saw all these four values in action. A few years ago, I was running an educational program in Uganda, and I met one of the participants, a young woman in her early 20s, an artist named Leila. We connected, and she expressed the complexity of her identity. She was gay in a country that at the time was taunting death penalty for homosexuality. In the few days that we spent together in this program, I could observe a part of her creative process, a process that was filled with love, a sense of collective responsibilities, courage, a process of awareness. And the result was this art piece, this object. The best way to describe it is by sharing with you what she wrote about it. And I quote, "Life becomes good when you find love. Rethinking of what is right makes you an activist. The world is full of diversity that we opt to embrace. I'm gay, and there are so many questions. Why proud? Why is so much torture and bullying in school? I'm dedicating this book of love to this community." This young, thank you. This young artist showed me the power of creativity, that creativity that transcends hacks and performance. So the question is, what if we will all be able to embrace creativity through these four values? Let's keep in mind that these values are not theoretical. They are practice. Empathy, courage, love, collective responsibility. These were often virtues that were associated to exceptional people, outliers. I believe that the era of creativity requires us to make them ours, and also to make them commonplace. Because creativity is a conduit of change. Embracing creativity means from passing to someone that have hope that something will change to be that hope. Because if there is one thing that creativity can do, is to make you a little bit freer. And anybody who's free is more willing to change the community that is around him or her. In this sense, creativity is the raw material of social change. I believe that every generation have a quest. This is ours. Thank you.